one. Lauren talked a lot about harassment. And just a note about harassment, Lauren, really highlighted the important work that DOJ and HUD are doing in terms of protecting victims of sexual harassment, which, is an epidemic. And it's, we've seen reports that in the context of COVID, that, there are landlords who are, targeting tenants who are behind on their rent for those sexual favors, those quid pro quo types of harassment that Lauren talked about. So, it's a very timely issue. But there also can be other forms of harassment that are based on your membership in a protected class, which Lauren alluded to in terms of, the groups that are protected by the Fair Housing Act. But that's the key there, is that there has to be a connection between your membership in a particular protected class and the action and housing discrimination. And so you can have harassment, for example, based on somebody's race, right? Somebody can engage in harassment by maybe constantly using racial epithets and threats and other things that make it really uncomfortable for a person to live in a particular unit because of the color of their skin, because of their race. There could be harassment based on somebody's disability, et cetera. So, I think sexual harassment is very much top of mind right now just because of, what's happening in the world. But, I also just want to remind folks, and folks at NAHT were involved when HUD put out their regulations around harassment a few years ago, in providing comments, about the harassment that folks are seeing in housing. And so those are really important. And so, just know that when we're talking about harassment, we're also just talking more broadly as well. Though sexual harassment is the one that comes to mind for folks. Lauren already went over this, so I'm not gonna dwell on this, but and these slides are included in the materials. So thank you to Cherry for putting those, my late addition, into the materials. And these are the 7 protected classes under the Federal Fair Housing Act. So, a couple of things to note. Lauren mentioned, familial status, meaning, having minor children. And then in certain circumstances, national origin could potentially mean somebody's language, if that's associated with their national origin. Sometimes sex discrimination can include discrimination against survivors of domestic violence. It just really depends on the facts of the case. But as we're talking, these are the protections that are provided under the federal act. And then just really quickly, for folks who live in HUD-assisted housing, there are a few additional protections that you should be aware of, including Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which applies to programs that receive federal financial assistance. So that's going to be, public housing authorities, project-based Section 8 units. It doesn't necessarily apply to a private voucher landlord, but it will apply to, the housing authority who's administering the program. And what that practically means, I think, for tenants, one of the big sort of protections that come out of that statute is the ability to have meaningful language access when you're accessing HUD programs. So that includes, language interpretation, translation of important documents, et cetera. And it is very much case-by-case basis. But just know that those protections are there. There's also Section 504, which is another type of disability protections. I think the important thing for tenants to know here is that, it provides for access for people with disabilities. And sorry, I'm getting text messages apparently. What that means in terms of reasonable modifications, that means that the tenant is not on the hook for those modifications. Whereas if you were in private housing, you would be. So that's an important point to note for tenants. I mentioned my work on domestic violence issues. So just know that as HUD tenants in HUD housing, all of the HUD programs basically that I think folks at this conference are concerned with, including public housing, project-based Section 8, the voucher program, as well as other non-HUD programs, so things like the low-income housing tax credit program, et cetera. Those programs have particular protections for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, et cetera. And so, Lauren talked a lot about sexual harassment, and, in terms of the law, those, ideas are distinct. But a lot of times, there may be assault involved in terms of, if you have a landlord who may be engaging in sexual harassment, it may escalate to assault. So there are special protections for folks who live in HUD housing programs. I think the biggest one is just knowing that as a victim of domestic violence, you can't be evicted because of the abuse committed against you. So, if you are living in a HUD unit and there maybe is an abusive spouse and there's damage to the unit, the landlord can't evict everybody because of the damage to the unit. The idea would be to get the abusive spouse out of the household in that situation. And this is a little bit off of the main topic today, which is fair housing, but we see fair housing and housing discrimination very broadly. And so I just wanted to flag that for folks. NHLP has a number of resources on our website about tenants' rights under VAWA. So if you have questions about that, or if you know of folks who are dealing with domestic violence issues, our website can be a really good starting point. But also folks should definitely seek out local domestic violence programs to make sure that folks are getting the support they need. And then finally, the equal access rule. So just know that in HUD housing programs, tenants can't be discriminated against because of sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status. So these are sort of extra protections that folks have just by virtue of living in HUD programs. And Lauren mentioned this as well, but just also as you're thinking about fair housing protections, think about whether or not there are state and local laws that may offer additional protections. I practice out here in California. We have a number of additional protected classes in our state fair housing statute. One that was just added was military status last year. So, again, just, and the way that you would do that, and Lauren alluded to this earlier, is if you're dealing with a fair housing issue or you think you may be experiencing discrimination, you can always reach out to local fair housing agencies. They may also have, more information online. Your state may have an agency that also enforces state civil rights laws in housing. And they might have information on their website about what categories are protected. There's a later slide with a link on how you can look up how to find your local fair housing organizations. And so I just wanted to capture, what housing discrimination can look like. Lauren gave a really good example of sex discrimination in the sense of sexual harassment. There's also disability discrimination, which can include not providing a reasonable accommodation when it is reasonable and it's necessary. So it may be an emotional support animal, it may be in a closer parking space. These issues of disability discrimination can also be, not renting to someone who may have a child with a cognitive disability. So, disability discrimination can also include, refusing to rent to somebody or evicting someone because they experience a disability, or it could just be a denial of a reasonable accommodation that wasn't justified. We talked about familial status discrimination, as well as race discrimination, and the examples that Lauren gave are actually very similar to the ones that I have, so I won't belabor those. But also just remember national origin discrimination. You know, that can occur if a landlord refuses to rent to someone or a family because, you know, there may not be English speakers in the household. And just know that by virtue of living in HUD-assisted housing, there's also this additional protection for providing language access, including interpretation and translation. Okay, moving right along. Just want to make sure I have enough time. And I talked about this a little bit, just Lauren mentioned sort of disparate impacts. So neutral policies that, you know, on the surface apply to everyone the same, but if you dig a little bit deeper, they may have disproportionate impacts on certain groups of folks. So, you know, a couple of examples here may be, you know, evicting domestic violence survivors who are women because of, you know, a zero tolerance policy or a crime-free policy, which are pretty common. Or, you know, just evicting tenants solely on the basis of an arrest without more, that could potentially disproportionately impact communities of color. So, you know, I think really the upshot here is that, you know, if you have a situation where, you know, you feel like you may have experienced housing discrimination, and you're not sure though, or you're not sure, you know, one avenue is to go ahead and file a complaint, you know, with HUD or with a state agency. But you know, it's also really important and valuable to seek out assistance from a local fair housing agency, as they can help walk you through that process. We talked about this already, and Lauren mentioned sort of the time limitations on bringing fair housing claims. Yeah, so, you know, I think this piece is just, again, there's the link, and this should be in the materials for fair housing agencies. And let's see, oh, okay, I lost my place. And the other thing too is, you know, if you're dealing with an incidence of housing discrimination, just practically speaking, if you ever get an eviction notice or subsidy termination notice, that's when you want to reach out to legal aid right away, just to make sure that, you know, your rights are preserved and that, you know, all the procedural protections that could be in place are preserved. And then you can also deal with the housing discrimination issue either at the same time, just depending on what the situation is, or, you know, so, but I think in terms of just order of importance, if you ever get an eviction or termination notice, you definitely want to reach out to legal aid right away. Okay. All right, any questions on that? And then I have sort of this other bucket that Michael wanted me to cover, but let me try and pull up the chat. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Terry. All right, so we're gonna move right along just so we have time for questions at the end, because I think we're going till 6:30, sorry. All right, so Michael also wanted me to talk to folks just about some recent developments in terms of housing rights of immigrant families, and, you know, just some recent developments in terms of the law and kind of where those things stand, because folks had questions. I will confess, I am standing in for our immigration expert who is currently on a well-deserved vacation, but I can hopefully handle kind of the basic questions, and if you have a more complicated situation or issue that you want to talk through, we can definitely follow up. So just so you know, so basically, there are some anticipated changes that are coming to the way that HUD calculates subsidies for folks who have families who are called mixed status families, which means there's mixed immigration status in the household. So I will explain what that means. So just by way of quick background, so eligibility for most HUD housing, and we are talking about the big programs like public housing, project-based Section 8, et cetera. Those programs, the eligibility for those programs are actually governed by this law called Section 214 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1980. We call it 214. And the idea there is that this statute, kind of dictates what immigration statuses are eligible to live in HUD subsidized housing and receive a housing subsidy. So hopefully after I talk through this, it'll make a little bit more sense in practice. So I mentioned, here are the programs that we're really talking about: public housing, voucher program, project-based Section 8, a few of these older subsidy programs that are more legacy programs, but the top three are sort of the big three programs. And these are subject to immigration restrictions under 214. So what that means is currently is that you have to have one of these immigration statuses on the slide. And you can see some of them are very, very, very specific. But we're talking about US citizens and nationals and lawful permanent residents. Those are the two that I'm going to focus on just because for time. But if you have specific questions, you can reach out to NHLP. We are not immigration law experts. We're definitely housing folks. And so, it might end up that we refer you to someone who is more conversant in the immigration aspects. But the idea here is that you have to fall within one of these buckets to get a HUD subsidy. So if you're in a voucher household, for example, and you're on the voucher, you have to have one of these. You have to have one of these immigration statuses in order for your portion of the rent to be subsidized. So, 214 is very specific in terms of the types of immigrants who and folks who are eligible versus folks who are not eligible for these programs. One thing in terms of 214 restrictions, one important category that is not covered, meaning they're not eligible for a HUD subsidy, are DACA recipients. So just know that if you're sort of trying to figure out what populations this may or may not apply to. So under the current law, we have what are called mixed status families. So basically it means that you have you only have to have one person in the household who is immigration eligible. And their portion of the rental subsidy is covered. And then folks who are ineligible to live in HUD housing can still live in the household, but their portion of the rent is not subsidized. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about mixed status families. You have some folks who get a subsidy and some folks who don't get a subsidy. So as I mentioned, currently what happens is that there's a proration happening. And so that means that certain folks in the household can get a subsidy and then other folks don't, but they can still live within the same household. So I can't remember the date now just because I feel like time is just a very odd concept these days, but basically, I guess a year or two ago, HUD issued a proposal to update the regulations related to this program. And essentially what it wants to do is say, all right, there are gonna be no more mixed status families. Everyone in the household has to fall within those categories listed in Section 214. So everyone has to have eligible immigration status. And so it would effectively say there are no more mixed status families in the household. And it also has some new documentation requirements for folks who are citizens, who are elderly immigrants, such that they have to demonstrate that they are in fact eligible to live in HUD housing. So, we're really concerned about the projected impacts of the rule. We're really concerned about the number of folks. One very common sort of iteration of a mixed status family is you will have parents or one or more parents who may not be immigration eligible, but their children are US citizens. And so they are able to live in this mixed status household. But because children, generally can't, be the only household members, there's this question of, and we anticipate that basically immigrant families who have mixed status families are just going to lose their HUD housing. And so, we're really concerned about the impacts on homelessness. It's just going to exacerbate a lot of the affordable housing issues that we see. And so we're very concerned about it. We're very much opposed to this rulemaking, and just for a number of reasons. But it looks that it's going to proceed forward. It has not been finalized yet. And we're particularly concerned about the impact on children. I think our numbers say about 58,000 US citizen children, most of whom are all citizens, may lose their HUD housing. So it's a very concerning development. There's also going to be additional documentation requirements, which were also just for everyone, for basically anyone who lives in HUD housing. And we're concerned about the impacts that might have, regardless of immigration status, just because we know that, low-income folks, seniors, African Americans can often face difficulties in getting, official documents that might be necessary to prove someone's immigration status. But that is what the rule proposes. We don't know what the final regulation is going to look like. I want to make sure I'm respectful of time. But, again, just more information about, what the rule is going to do and impact. And the bulk of families this is going to impact are in California, Texas, and New York. And so, it's gonna, if it goes into effect, it will have some pretty widespread consequences. And we also think, not only against immigrant families, but, all families in terms of the documentation requirement. And so we just have some, information about sort of estimates from one of our partner organizations in terms of the breakdown. And you can see it disproportionately impacts Hispanic or Latinx folks and families, Black families on the documentation side. So, it does have some pretty negative consequences for people of color. What is the status of the final rule? So to the extent this is a timeline, it's not a very good timeline, unfortunately, sorry. But really where we are is we're not sure when the final rule is going to come out. It is not in effect yet, but it could be soon. We really don't know. We're trying to track where it is in terms of the regulatory process. The comment period was ended about a year ago, and the public comment period, and I'm sure a lot of folks in this group, participated in the commenting process. And so thank you to those who did, but that was about a year ago. So, we don't know when this rule is going to come out. We're obviously in the middle of a pandemic. So, just really uncertain about when you know, this rule is going to come out. But, you know, I would say if you or someone you know, at least on the immigration aspects of this regulation, you know, are concerned, definitely reach out to either an immigration attorney or contact your local legal aid office to see if they have an immigration practice to kind of walk you through, you know, what the implications are, you know, for your particular situation, because unfortunately we can't make big generalizations on the webinar today.
Renee, could I ask you a question?
Oh, sure. Yeah, please.
No,
Sorry, I
it's
wasn't
gonna
at the
be-
chat. Yeah, go ahead.
I just saw a slide. I just got on. I just saw a slide, and it stated something about U.S. citizens.
Yes, ma'am. Let me go back to that.
Had like 48% Blacks, and they're U.S. citizens that would have to. What would they have to do?
I was going to ask the question.
Sure. And thank you for highlighting that. So the idea is that under this proposal, and of course this is as proposed, we don't know what the final is going to actually look like, but the proposal is to basically have some new documentation requirements so that folks who are living in HUD housing programs would have to essentially prove their citizenship eligibility somehow. And so in terms of the analysis that some of our partners did, it's really concerning in terms of, you know, what that's going to look like for folks who, you know, may not have an immigration issue, but may have issues, you know, proving that they're a U.S. citizen.
But
most
they got into housing. So why is it now that they're asking for another type of document? U.S. citizens had to prove this before moving into HUD housing. So what deep are they digging into that they want from U.S. citizens? I don't understand this.
Yeah, so, you know, and I would just say too, like, we don't know that that's going to be the final determination. And, you know, you're right. When you apply, you generally give a social or some other sort of information in order to establish the subsidy. So, you know, again, I think it's, you know, it's just not entirely clear what the final requirements are going to be. You know, we're monitoring this at NHLP, obviously, and when the final comes out, we'll definitely have more information and, you know, resources for folks. But it's, yeah.
So you don't right now, Renee. You don't have any idea what the new documentation would be. I mean, first of all, most Black people was born right here in the United States. So why would they need to prove more U.S. citizenship?
Yeah, I think, you know, it just has to do with the fact because there are these families who have mixed immigration statuses. So the idea was to sort of make everyone.
Black folks.
Yeah, so
it's my first time seeing this. That's why I'm saying.
I have mixed immigrant status also. So I don't know how you can say, you know, Blacks of all people, and
Right.
then there's no whites there at all.
Yeah, 27%.
I don't know who did this grid. I don't know who did this.
27% white, Jerry.
I think this was the breakdown of the analysis of the impacts it was going to have overall on folks, and they did a breakdown by race. Yeah.
We gotta look into this.
Even though you have proven that you moved in HUD housing, and we had to show our birth certificates, everything.
Everything you had.
What documents do they want?
Yeah, and I will say too, you know, like I said, it might not be in the final, you know, so I think it's probably, you know, and I'm happy to have our immigration person to follow up with Michael to kind of give a more detailed description of what the proposal was.
Yes.
I'm definitely pinch hitting today. But yeah, no, I think that's a really good question because, you know, I know we work on HUD program issues, and, you know, obviously there are already checks in place for immigration status. So, but yeah, I'll have Ariana as our point person who's out this week, and I can tell her to send Michael some more information about the specific proposals, but again, it's still just a proposal.
This is just strange because it's the first time I'm seeing it. First time we heard about the mixed income, rule, but this is the first time I've seen this.
Yeah. So
Charlotte.
This is shocking, and this is
Yes.
nothing. You want to say this is racism? That's all it is. Blatantly racism. That's all it is.
Wait, what? I'm lost. I'm a little lost. What are we talking about? I know what we're talking about, but I'm a little lost. It's me, Dacia.
Hi, Dacia. No, I think it's just this part of the proposal for mixed status families that's going to have an additional documentation requirement, that requires folks to, show their immigration status. And rightfully so, folks are, wondering what the rationale is. But I will definitely, since there seems to be a lot of interest, I will definitely have Ariana follow up with Michael, and he can.
There has to be some rationale to this, because as a Black American born in America, don't have any descendant of any place else, it's a disgrace and it's an embarrassment to the Black race. I really do believe, and we're right at the top at 48%, and I don't believe that. Other races, maybe, but they shouldn't put us in a certain category, because, I look at it, and I don't think what you guys might say, but I look at it as blatant racism. I don't care what anyone say. That's how I see it. And until I see an interpretation of how this was done, it wasn't done the right way.
And I will say, no, I agree. NHLP vigorously opposed this regulation. And one of the points we made was exactly, what you're talking about in terms of the disproportionate impact on folks and what that breakdown and who's going to be negatively affected.
This came out from HUD, or where did this?
Yeah, it was proposed from HUD a year ago, but it hasn't been finalized yet.
What department did it come out of?
HUD.
HUD. So it came out when the mixed family thing was trying to come out?
It's a part of that bigger regulation, yeah.
Because many times I heard people talk about it in our conference in different places. I never heard anyone say anything about this part. So,
we have Jim Grove from the National Housing Law Project working with NAHT, and he has never mentioned this to us. And we had what's the guy name from that always come and talk to us about when the mixed income thing came out with this. What the name from I'm talking about, Jerry, the tall guy was Rice. What the name? Doug Rice.
Doug Rice.
Doug Rice, yeah.
He never mentioned this part of it. I never even heard him.
And Doug's organization was one of the folks who did this analysis. So that's on the screen. Yeah. So I will tell you
I understand what they mean, because as for me, I was born and raised in Boston, so were my family, but my grandmother was born in Puerto Rico, just my grandmother, and people always discriminate against me, and it pisses me off too, because my whole family are from here, and my grandmother was born in Puerto Rico, but Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know their history, but as for me, I never lived on the island, and I'm from Boston,
Well, they only have Hispanic and Latinx down for 19%. Blacks are at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And I think,
what I'm trying to say is that I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. My whole family was born here.
I understand what you're saying.
Except my grandmother. And either way, she's still a U.S. citizen, because Puerto Rico was part of the United States 107 years ago. And then they always discriminate against me, like talking about where you from. I'm like, I'm from here. And I always got to provide different documents. And it's like a slap in the face, because I've always lived in Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying. Okay, we have like 50.
And my ancestors are My ancestors are Native American Indians. So I don't know, am I supposed to dig up my ancestors to show them that, you know, hey, we were here before anybody else. So what, you know, what do you want me to do? Just because I'm Black, everybody's saying everyone Black should go back to Africa or we're from Africa. That's not true.
No, and, you know, I think, you know, as you know, NHLP's been working on a lot of these different issues, and, you know, this was one of the arguments that we made in our comments, you know, opposing this regulation was, you know, just that it's going to have a disproportionate impact.
This is a big disproportionate impact.
Well, we really thank you because otherwise we would have never known about this.
This is a big eye opener, Renee. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, no, I'm really glad to hear that, you know, that this is a new piece of information. I mean, I'm sorry it's a new piece of information.
Yeah, we're not jumping on you, but
no,
really
but
about this myself.
no, you know, and
Oh
I think,
God.
you know, and like I said, you know, we don't know what the final is going to look like. The final, you know, we don't know, but we're definitely on top of it. And so, but what I'll do, just because there's a lot of interest, and just so we have time for questions, I will definitely have Ariana put together some more specific information about the documentation piece.
We're jumping on this right away.
Yeah, we might have to might have to
Gonna get
pass
on
this
this
on
right
to
away.
Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter.
I don't like this.
Yeah, so I will definitely have someone from NHLP share more detailed information. But
yeah.
no, but thank you for.
Thank you, Renee.
Yeah.
Thank you, Renee. Yes, we're gonna have
the
to.
attorney in here with.
This was a great workshop. It was very informative, and
Yeah,
I thank
very,
each and
very.
every one of you
Yes.
guys.
We have to wrap. Don't forget
Oh,
to
yeah.
fill out our evaluation form, please.
And
You're gonna put it in, Cherry, your link.
Hi, guys.
We put it in already.
hi.
Oh, hi.
So I don't know, Ms. Rogers, did you want to do questions, or do you want us to just open up for questions? It's up to you.
Yeah, just open up the question because it's 6:18 already. Yeah. We just go as far as you can go. If any question or comments or anything, I think I already had said my comments. I don't have any more. This really took me by surprise. Any question or comments, or anybody want anything?
It was a very good workshop. I'm really glad that I picked this one. Lauren and Renee, you guys did a very good job.
Oh, thank you.
I see somebody said something in the chat there.
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Texas has over.
Yeah.
Texas, what did it say? Texas have over 140 African-American born immigrants. You cannot know if someone is a citizen by looking at them. So we also have a huge Black immigration problem. It's going to be hard on both population. It's wrong.
You know what?
Yeah, I agree.
The one thing I'll say is just, you know, we just hope that people will be vigilant reporters, both to your local fair housing groups, you know, to Renee's organization. You know, please report to us at DOJ. I did in the chat box. We have launched a new civil rights reporting, like, full-on website that will direct, you know, that portal is going to be directed to all the other sections of DOJ that enforce civil rights statutes, so not just housing related statutes. So certainly, please, you know, as things come up that you have questions about or you might think is a discrimination issue, please report, because that's what we're here for.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Absolutely. And yeah, please also use the link to other fair housing organizations, and you know, or if you have questions, my contact information is on the slides. You know, we don't represent individual tenants, but, you know, we work with NAHT a lot, so we can, you know, we're happy to work with folks.
I was saying we know how to reach you, Renee.
Could Ms. Marks, could you put what you just said in the chat? I didn't see it.
I will add it to the chat. I think I already included it.
I think you did before, yeah.
I'll put it in again.
Okay, thank you.
Any more question or anything?
And Renee, you put the slides on the chat, right?
I
I'll email you either way because you gave me your email.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, and I think my slides are in the folder, is what Sherry said. There's the link.
What folder? So if I click on it, it'll take me to the folder.
Yeah, I'll
It's up in the chat box again. It's a Google Drive folder.
So if I don't click on it, it won't save on my device.
There we go. I think a couple of people. It's the one right before Deborah's chat in the chat box.
I see Eleanor is back. Eleanor?
She might be back, but she's not saying anything.
Hey, Eleanor.
Can you take, yeah, go ahead.
Unmute or I'll knock on your door.
Unmute.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Penny.
Hey,
Eleanor,
Delia.
thanks for doing this, Eleanor.
Oh, I'm not doing anything. I'm confused.
That's all right. Thank you for trying anyway. Thank you so much.
We'll get her back up there. We'll get her up there. She's getting better now. Woohoo!
Yes.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Okay.
I stepped in for you, but thank you. I'm glad you was on the train.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Out there in California,
Take care.
okay?
Oh, California's a long way away.
I'm also in California,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Oh, really?
yeah, in San Francisco.
Eleanor is my next door neighbor.
Oh,
We've been comrades in the struggle for decades.
Yes.
All right. Woo-hoo! Eleanor, when we fight?
Not great.
Eleanor, when we fight?
Will we fight?
When we fight, what happens?
Fight.
We win.
We win. When we fight, we win.
We win.
There you go.
Okay, we're going to,
Thanks,
Wow,
everyone.
this is
Thank
really
y'all
a good
so much.
group.
Thank you so much.
I'm
And
Thank you.
amazed.
it's a great, it was a great panel. Thank you so much
thank you.
for coming on and
Good
sharing,
Charlotte.
Charlotte.
Thank you for holding
sharing
it,
this
Charlotte.
hour with us.
Thank
Hour
you
and
for
a half.
doing this.
We really,
Thank you, Nat.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
evening. Yeah, bye.
Don't forget to
It's done
do your
after this, right? Just do the evaluation and then we're done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this was a good 3 days. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for
God bless you. God
I
bless you.
appreciate
God
being
bless
on
you.
Zoom. I'm in California next to Eleanor. I can't go up to visit you in person, but boy, have I heard stories from Eleanor and Stefan who always go.
Oh, great. Well, just a good opportunity for you so you can at least see what it goes on.
I am so thrilled to have been able to be part of what I've been able to be part of.
Good.
So much.
Glad you enjoyed.
Same here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Everyone go get a toast.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you. Welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Renee.
Okay.
Hopefully we